Hello, and thanks for stopping by. Today I'd like to discuss my Linux journey. So I've been working with computers since I was about 6 or 8 years old, and so I've been with Windows my entire life. Well, most of my life anyway, not my entire life, because, we're here. This is why it's called a Linux journey. But I started with Windows 95, and my interest in computers grew from there. And so in 2022, 23 was when I first heard about Linux, and I'm like, hey, I really want to try this out because it looks fun, it looks interesting, it looks new, and I just want to see what I can do with it. And so I installed it on my computer. It was Pop! OS, as a matter of fact. That was the distribution that I was using. That's what was being recommended to me at the time as a beginner. And I stuck it in there, did the installation. I had a complication with the installation because it was user error. I did not back up my files. Yeah, I didn't back up my files, and I became a very, very sad penguin. And I had to go to my old laptop just to get half of my files because I didn't even have all my files backed up there. I only had half my files. And I was like, oh, thank goodness I have my files. Like I said, not all of them like I would love to have, but I had half of them, and I was grateful for that nonetheless. And so I say that to say this: make sure you back up all your files to an external hard drive before you just start tinkering and installing a operating system or a distribution. That's all I gotta say about that. But I did the installation. The installation went fine otherwise, and I was greeted with the GNOME desktop environment. And I was glad that I saw the GNOME desktop environment and not the KDE environment. Because if I had seen the KDE environment, I probably would have just never looked back, more than likely. Because the thing about GNOME was, before I get into GNOME, what I will say about KDE is that there are some things that I enjoy about KDE. The biggest thing that I enjoy from KDE is Kdenlive. As far as video editing is concerned, it's great for that. And I just don't like it as much as I like GNOME as a desktop environment, because with GNOME it gave me that Mac look and feel, and it was nice, and I liked it, and it was something that I could truly customize. At the time, like in my head, I'm like, oh wow, finally something I can customize. And I started doing my customizations here and there. And, so I was happy with Pop! OS for a little while. But then I started getting bored. And I said, let's try a different distribution. Let's see if that cures my boredom. And so the next thing I went with was Ubuntu. Well, Ubuntu was more limiting than Pop! OS was. Pop! OS had quite a few features that was really nice, and especially something that I would later find out is tiling windows. It had that, and Ubuntu just didn't. And that's, I guess, what I really liked about Pop! OS. But I didn't know it as like tiling windows at the time. I just knew that you could you didn't have to drag your window wherever you wanted to drag it, and they didn't overlap each other. That's all I knew about it. So I was on Ubuntu for a little while. I was limited on customization, and then one day I heard about these things called tiling window managers, and I said, ooh, what is this? And I'm like, heck yeah, let's jump on that. So I decided, because I was being told that archlinux was going to be my best bet for tiling window managers, and I said, you know what? Let's use Arch, by the way. So I got on Arch, and my first time I did a Arch install, like the command Arch install. I did not use the normal method for installing Arch. I don't shame people for using Arch install. In fact, I still use Arch install to this day. In fact, the last time I installed Arch was with Arch install. However, I have done a video. Well, actually, it was a live stream. I did a live stream. I failed twice, and then on the last time I was successful with installing Arch normally. and I even installed it with encryption, like disk encryption. So, you know, you can check that video out. I'll either have it as a time card or I will put it in the description. But yeah, I used Arch install and I installed Qtile. And I went with Qtile because it was the most appealing to me at the time. And a lot of the reason why it was appealing was just because of the fact that you could code in Python. And since I had just jumped off ship from customizing Discord bots, you know, I didn't use Python. I used JavaScript, but I knew a little bit about Python to be able to get my foot in the door for learning more about it. And so what I did was, once I got Qtile on there, I started customizing it the way that I liked it. And I was like, this is a completely different look and feel than what I'm used to. Like, it is something that I can truly call mine because I don't think anyone else has my setup. And so that's the beauty of having like tiling window managers. Is like you make it into something that like is completely yours, in my opinion, because like no one else is going to have the same setups, I don't think. And so, you know, I was rocking the archlinux Qtile install for a little while, and it got to a point where like I got bored of well, actually, it wasn't that I got bored. I just ran out of stuff to do with my customizations. And the thing about tiling window managers is that you're not ready for a tiling window manager if you aren't willing to code and if you aren't willing to use the terminal. Those are two things that you need for that. I would recommend, because, you know, it was actually asked by a couple of people, or at least one person that I'm aware of, because I made a post about like what should my next video be about, and people said my Linux journey, and they said, can you give us a guide or links to resources? And so here's my guide to starting as a beginner. If you want to use Linux as a beginner, I would recommend using anything that is using GNOME. That is going to be the most user-friendly, in my opinion. And so the two distributions that I would recommend is Linux Mint, even though they use Cinnamon. I would recommend Linux Mint. Recommend that. And I would recommend Pop! OS. Those are the two I would recommend you starting out. And I would, like I said, start. If you don't choose one of those recommendations, I would choose something that is GNOME based, because otherwise, you know, your only other option, you know, unless you wanted to use Cinnamon or some other desktop environment, or like I think these days there's also the Cosmic desktop environment out, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, you've got choices, but those are the ones I recommend. And if you're going with a tiling window manager, that's a completely separate like topic. Well, you know, because the point is what's good for beginners. And so those are my recommendations. And I don't like it when people say just pick one, because basically what you're telling them is that you can pick Arch and you can pick Gentoo and you should be fine. And I'm like, that's some really stupid advice to just say pick one. And it's all because they're too lazy to give any recommendations, any actual recommendations. Or they just don't want to look like they're wrong about whatever they're recommending, so they end up not recommending something. And I'm like, well, that's stupid too, because you need to be like, when you're asked like what you would recommend, you need to have something in mind. You need to be able to point someone in the right direction, because the thing is that you need to start small and then work your way from there. And that's what Linux Mint and Pop! OS aim to do, in my opinion, is that they you start on them, you don't end with them. Linux is a journey, not a destination. So you can choose whatever it is you want to eventually, but for now, Let's get you on the basics, because the last thing we want to do is get you on something where you're not enjoying Linux. Because if you started off with something like Arch Linux or Gentoo and you are a beginner, or like, you're not tech savvy and all that good stuff, then you're going to have a bad time. You're not going to want to come back to Linux, and that's just the way it's going to be. And we would rather have you have a good user experience when it comes to using Linux. So that's why I say start off small and go from there. But getting back to my Linux journey, I was on Arch Linux and Qtile for a little while, got bored of it, and I started ping-ponging back and forth between Windows and Arch Linux. And one day, I decided to use Debian, and that's when I started my channel, was when I used Debian. And I was looking, and it said that I could use a tiling window manager with it. I'm limited on tiling window managers, but I could use it. And I had heard of this thing called AwesomeWM. And it was interesting to me because I, had never heard of AwesomeWM, but I thought that it was the one that looked the best out of all of the window managers that I had to choose from for Debian. Because Debian is known for being stable and secure. So I'm limited on certain things, like, for example, I'm limited on what OBS I can use. Like, I can't use Titan 652. I have to use, like, whatever they give me, and, that's that. Because you don't have the Arch user repository, or the AUR. You just have, of course you have Debian backports, but, like, I'd rather not do the backports if I don't have to. Sometimes you have to, though. But I really would not want to go to Trixie or Sid. Would not want to go to either one of those, if I'm being honest. That's not for me. Like, I tried it one time. It wasn't that great. But if you wanted to, you can install whatever you wanted to that way. And there is a way to install Qtile through Debian. In fact, JustAGuy Linux, I'll link him down in the description as well, if I can remember it. JustAGuy Linux has actually done videos in the past talking about how he got Qtile on Debian. So it is possible. It's just kind of difficult to get your way through there. But, for Debian, I would recommend AwesomeWM. I have a ton of videos on that, and I will also link that in the description as well, if I can remember all of these things that I need to link. But AwesomeWM was great. I loved it because I was able to do the most customizations I had ever done in my life, and it was getting to a point where, like, I started my YouTube channel, and I really wanted other people to know all the cool things that I was doing with it. And so I started making these videos, and and it was great. And it got to a point where, like I said in my Sweet Linux video, that I started getting burnt out. And so I went back to Windows for a year. And it was, it was a boring user experience for like a year, because all I did was just watch videos and surf the web. Sometimes I would make music, but that was really about it. And so, I come back a year later. I come back in 2025, and that's when I started using Hyprland and Waybar. And it was because when I came back to Arch, I said everyone else has gone to Wayland now, because like some of the known distributions were jumping ship and going with Wayland, and I just said it's time. It's time that we move from X11 to Wayland, and I did so. And I don't regret it, because I can do way more customizations than I did in AwesomeWM. Isn't that weird? Isn't that insane to think about? Like, there's a lot that I can do and then some. Like, it doesn't limit me as much as AwesomeWM did in some ways. And I'm just now finding that out. So it was a great experience so far since using Hyprland and Waybar. It's been great. Haven't had any... I was fixing to say I didn't have any issues. The only issues that I really had, which is more of a cosmetic thing than anything, was in OBS Studio, I can't use custom docks. That makes me a sad penguin, but I'll get over it. Like, I'll find ways around being able to look at my YouTube chat while I'm live, So it's not really that big of a deal. It's one of those quality of life things. And so, basically, that is my Linux journey. And to summarize, some of my points that I've been making, the biggest point that I've been making was about choosing the right Linux distribution. I think that's what a lot of people would like to know. Starting off as a Linux journey, because it was obviously successful enough for me that I have come back to Linux even after all these years of using it. Like, I've still come back to it. Like, yeah, I go to Windows sometimes, or I used to go to Windows sometimes, but like, this is where I plan to be from now on. I just feel like there's a lot to do with it. There's my customizations that I love about it. And, but yeah, going back to the whole beginner thing. Like I said before, you want to choose something that, will give you a great user experience your first time. And so for your first time, I would recommend either Linux Mint or Pop! OS. If you are using a window manager, if you want to use X11, I would use Debian with AwesomeWM. Or, I mean, heck, you can even use AwesomeWM with archlinux if you wanted to. If you wanted something with X11. If you want Wayland, I would recommend Hyprland Waybar with Arch Linux. And so, with that being out of the way, I want to thank you guys for watching. I know it's been a long one. Like I said in my last video, I plan on doing more long form content. That's what I'm hoping for. And so, if you guys could, please give me a like and subscribe. And I shall see you guys in the next video.